You're 30. You open a retirement calculator, and the first number feels embarrassing before you even understand the buttons. You type your age, then current retirement savings. The box waits. Rude little rectangle. You enter 0, or something close enough to 0 that it feels like 0 wearing a nicer hat. Mechanically, the calculator is not grading your adulthood. A compound interest tool asks for inputs like an initial investment, monthly contribution, length of time, estimated interest rate, and compounding frequency. Those are levers, not personality traits. Change a lever, and a projected path changes too. But your brain translates the blank savings box into a report card from future you, who apparently owns a clipboard and size and spreadsheet. So the laptop starts feeling less like a map, and more like evidence that you already failed. The uncertainty matters. This is an illustrative story, not a personal forecast. And a calculator cannot promise what investments will return. It can only organize assumptions you choose to test. So do not close it yet. First, we separate the benchmark shame from the math. Then future you walks back in and makes the screen useful again. Then you see one of those age milestones. By 30, some retirement guides say you should aim for around 1 times your salary saved. Helpful? Maybe. Emotionally, it lands like a frying pan. You look at your balance, then at the benchmark, then back again, as if the number might improve if you glare politely. It does not. Here's the mechanism underneath the panic. Fidelity describes its age-based savings factors as aspirational goalposts built on stated assumptions, and notes that personal goals vary. A goalpost can help you aim. It should not tackle you in the parking lot. If your balance is nowhere near that poster, the consequence is not a moral verdict. It is a signal that the benchmark belongs beside your own assumptions, not above your head like a scoreboard with feelings. The uncertainty is real. Rent, childcare, medical bills, debt, job gaps, family support, or wages billed by someone who apparently prices groceries and imaginary money can change the path. This viewer story is illustrative, so your actual plan has to fit your actual life. Next, future you stops treating the benchmark like a report card and turns the calculator into a map. Before you slam the laptop shut, pause on the half-closed screen. The benchmark just made your balance feel like a public confession. But the room is not empty. Kiplinger, citing Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances data, reported median retirement savings of $18,350 for households under 35 and $45,000 for ages 35 to 44. Investopedia also reported from Federal Reserve data that a substantial share of households in their 30s had no retirement account in 2022, and that among those with retirement accounts, median balances were still modest. That context does not make a low balance painless. It does change the mechanism in your head. The number is less like a personal defect and more like a starting position many people recognize. There is still uncertainty inside every comparison. A median is not your exact finances, your household, or your next best move. And this illustrative viewer story is not individualized advice. So future you does not yell. Future you plants one calm finger on the laptop lid, slides the calculator back open, and points to the next question. Future you does not arrive rich. No yacht, no gold chair, no mysterious robe of financial wisdom. It is just the same blue shirt, a few extra lines under the eyes, and one hand sliding the calculator back across the table. The other hand lands on the red panic button before you can press it. The button is labeled Shame Payroll, which is dramatic for office equipment, but emotionally accurate. Future you does not need a speech. The gesture says, do not let embarrassment decide what gets automated, skipped, or avoided. The mechanism is unglamorous. The Department of Labor frames retirement security as requiring planning, commitment, and money, and says leaving retirement savings invested gives it more time to grow. Not magic, not a personality makeover, just a system that needs time on the board. If you close the laptop, the old balance does not improve. It just stays harder to look at. If you reopen it, the number becomes something you can work with. There is uncertainty here. Your path depends on your life, income, accounts, and trade-offs, and this viewer story is illustrative, not advice. Next, future you stops arguing with shame and turns the calculator into 4 inputs. Now the calculator stops being a courtroom and becomes a receipt printer. Future you does not let the giant result box judge you first. They cover it with one hand and make the screen ask for inputs before it asks for feelings. Mechanically, that is what a compound interest calculator is built to do. SEC Investor.gov's tool uses pieces like initial investment, monthly contribution, length of time, estimated interest rate, and compound frequency. For this example, 4 tabs lock in first. Age 30, starting balance $0, $500 per month, and an end age of 67. That turns a vague panic into a visible runway. The number 500 is not a moral minimum. For some households, it is manageable, and for others, it is rent, groceries, or not available this month. Here, it is just a clean example, so the calculator has something solid to chew on. The uncertainty matters. This is example math, not a promise, and the later totals are before taxes, fees, inflation, and investment volatility. The squirrel has not been domesticated. Next, Future You uncovers the rate box, and the receipt prints a range. Then Future You pulls out a calendar. Not a motivational calendar with a mountain and a quote about hustle. A plain, slightly ugly calendar. The useful kind. It starts at age 30, ends at age 67, and suddenly the floor has 37 years of little boxes on it. A retirement calculator needs this kind of runway because the inputs are not feelings. It asks for things like the starting amount, monthly contribution, length of time, estimated rate, and how often compounding happens. The calendar is the length of time input wearing shoes. That does not erase the late feeling. It does not rewind your 20s or make every past paycheck behave perfectly. But it does put empty squares back on the table. 1 month is not impressive. 12 months looks like a small row. 10 years starts to look like a habit with shoulders. The uncertainty is real. An estimated return is not a guarantee, and your real life may not fit the neat box on the screen. This is example math, not a promise. Next, the calculator needs a rate range. That is when the receipt starts printing and the calendar stops looking quite so unemployed. Now Future You lets the calculator print the receipt. Same example, with the inputs locked where you just put them. $0 starting balance, $500 a month, age 30 through age 67, an estimated return, and monthly compounding. At 5%, the model grows to about $640,000. At 7%, about $1,048,000. At 8%, about $1,358,000. That range is the mechanism. The monthly contribution keeps showing up, and time lets earlier dollars sit in the machine longer. The calculator is not complimenting you. It is not mad at you. It is just doing the deeply unglamorous job of compounding. The consequence is that the embarrassing first balance is not the ending. It is the starting line. A habit that feels small on one payday can become a visible future number if the runway actually gets used. But keep the receipt honest. These are illustrative numbers, before taxes, fees, inflation, and investment ups and downs, not guaranteed outcomes. No yacht-shaped sandwich has been authorized. Next, Future You shows the quieter danger, not starting at 30, but waiting 5 more years. Then, Future You does something slightly rude, but helpful. They take the same calendar and rip off 5 years. Not dramatically, quietly. That is the scary part. Waiting rarely arrives wearing a cape. It sounds like, after this busy season, once rent calms down, or when I finally feel like an adult with matching towels. Same $500 a month, same monthly compounding, same finish line at 67, just a start at 35 instead of 30. In that illustrative model, the age 35 path grows to about $472,000 at 5%, about $714,000 at 7%, and about $887,000 at 8%. Now compare it with the age 30 path, about $640,000 at 5%, about $1,048,000 at 7%, and about $1,358,000 at 8%. The missing 5 years are roughly $168,000, $334,000, or $471,000 in this model. You don't just miss 60 deposits. You remove early money that could have had more time to compound. This is example math, not a promise. It's before taxes, fees, inflation, and investment volatility. And if 500 is not realistic right now, the next move is not shame. It's building the first automatic month before the delay gets another calendar page. Future You does not bring a gong for this part. They just point at the paycheck on the table and the little coin in work boots waiting near the edge. The useful move happens before the month gets noisy. The mechanism is boring on purpose. Choose a first automatic amount and let it leave before every bill, craving, emergency, and forgotten subscription asks to debate it. The Department of Labor frames retirement security as something that takes planning, commitment, and money, and says leaving retirement savings invested gives it more time to grow. So the first month is not trying to prove you are suddenly perfect. It is trying to make one decision repeat without needing a fresh burst of courage every payday. If the money waits until the end, shame and real life get a vote. If it leaves first, the system gets a vote. Maybe $500 is not your number. Maybe 50 is the number that survives rent, debt, childcare, or a weird insurance bill shaped like a brick. Next, the coin needs somewhere deliberate to land. Because a habit with no landing spot has a way of wandering back into checking. At this point, the retirement account names start marching into the room wearing tiny badges. Workplace plan, IRA, contribution limit, tax year. Very official, very good at making a normal person suddenly need a snack. Keep lanes separate from orders. If your job offers a retirement plan, that may be one lane. An IRA may be another lane. The IRS announced that for tax year 2026, employee contributions to 401k, 403b, governmental 457 plans, and the federal thrift savings plan have a $24,500 limit, while the IRA limit is $7,500. Those limits do not mean you must hit them tomorrow. For someone starting now, the limit is usually not the starting line. It is the ceiling. The starting line is the amount you can actually keep sending without the habit collapsing by next Thursday. Access is uneven too. The Federal Reserve reported that just over 2/3 of working-age families participated in retirement plans in 2022, with participation uneven across income groups. So if your lane looks different, that matters. Next, future you stops comparing ceilings and watches the first small contribution become visible over time. This is example context, not in order. The first month still looks tiny. You automate the contribution, the money leaves, and the kitchen does not fill with retirement trumpets. The jar gets one coin, small, scuffed, and emotionally dressed like it survived a coupon drawer. Then, future you pulls the camera back. The coin is not impressive because it is large. It matters because it can repeat. The Department of Labor frames retirement security as planning, commitment, and money, and says leaving retirement savings invested gives it more time to grow. So the calendar starts doing the unglamorous work. 1 month becomes a row of boxes. The row becomes a habit the calculator can recognize. Loud purchases announce themselves immediately. This one disappears off stage and tries to become useful quietly. There is still uncertainty. Markets do not hand out guaranteed endings. Personal goals vary, and Fidelity's age-based milestones are aspirational goalposts based on assumptions, not a courtroom verdict on your 30s. Next, the camera stops asking whether the first coin looks heroic and asks whether it can survive next month. You are back at the calculator. Same table, same slightly judgmental rectangle, but the room feels different. The first balance is no longer a verdict. It is the place where the runway starts being drawn. The mechanism is boring in the useful way. A starting balance, a monthly contribution, time, an estimated return, and compounding. In the example you just watched, 0 at 30 plus $500 a month through 67 grew to about $640,000 at 5%, about $1,048,000 at 7%, or about $1,358,000 at 8%. That does not make starting at 30 identical to starting earlier. Waiting until 35 with the same $500 a month lowered the example to about $472,000, $714,000, or $887,000. 5 missing years did not make noise. They just quietly left the receipt. The uncertainty stays on the table. This is illustrative, before taxes, fees, inflation, and investment volatility, not a guaranteed outcome. Your real number may be smaller, larger, or delayed by life. So watch the next money choice the same way. What leaves automatically before shame can argue? If you had to choose one retirement number to automate this month, what amount would make future you feel invited instead of judged?